It is time for the Cyber Executive Podcast, where we talk to industry experts about risk, technology, and leadership. I am your host, Marc Ashworth, and today I have the pleasure of having author, adventurer, and former diplomat John Graham with the Draft Heroes and the Badass Granddad podcast here with me today. John, thank you very much for joining me on today's podcast.
My pleasure, Mark.
So just a quick reminder for our audience to make sure everyone like or follow us on your favorite podcasting app of choice, and be sure to share the Cyber Executive Podcast with all your friends. So let's get started here. John, you have such an amazing background, and one of it is around your ventures that you've done, and being one of the first to climb the north face of Denali at age 20. Is an amazing feat, and I'm sure that had taken a lot of teamwork in order to accomplish that. So can you kind of talk about that adventure a little bit and the importance of the teamwork to go through such a dangerous endeavor there?
It's interesting, Mark, because I can tell you lots of stories of other mountain climbs, some of them famous by other people, that have collapsed and been disastrous because there hasn't been teamwork, especially on climbing a big, dangerous mountain. Denali's north wall had never been climbed before because it was so freaking dangerous. Avalanches, rock falls, crevasses. We were the first to do it, and we were dodging avalanches and all that stuff, falling in crevasses. It took us over a month to claw our way up. And this face, by the way, is bigger than anything on Mount Everest, top to bottom. So it really was something. And so there we were, I think a total of 36, 37 days, 7 of us, all of us rambunctious youngsters, 20, 21. I think the oldest was 22 years old. So plenty of opportunities for conflict and showing off and all that kind of stuff. But it never happened. And we've met a couple times since then, and we still remark on that. And I think a lot of it was because we were so fixated on the goal. And it was so hard and so tough. And almost every day, one of us was holding the life of the other or others in our hands, holding it by the end of a rope, for example, or by guiding up a particularly dangerous spot or whatever. And we know that we would all be dead if it not weren't for the other 6, because in that 38 days, 37 days, I guarantee you there was at least once or twice when one of us was facing death in the face and the others pulled him out. So a lot of it was fixated on a goal with a vision not only of surviving, but of making one of the most iconic mountain climbs in all of North American mountaineering. So that was a large part of it. The other part of it was, it still mystifies me, because none of these guys back at Harvard were in my close circle of friends. We were climbers together. We trained together. We were friends for sure, but it wasn't like we were brothers. And so you might have thought that the minor altercations would have gotten worse, but they didn't. And I think a lot of it was because we had to share so much. We were trapped in our tents, for example, sometimes for 3 or 4 days at a time, and really difficult situations where a gust of wind the wrong way might have ripped the tents apart, killed all of us. And we all knew that. And I'd give you this, I know this is a family channel, Mark, but one of the things that brought us together was when we were trapped in a tent at like 19, 20,000 feet. And you have to sort of, like go to the bathroom in the middle of this wild ass storm, which means that you got to put a rope on, and then you got to crawl out of the side of this mountain face, 45, 50 degrees, put your ice axe in, hang on for dear life, drop your trousers, do your thing. And everybody else was inside the tent at the other end of that rope. So we had great fun composing letters to our parents saying, "Hey, dear Mr. and Mrs. Roberts, I'm sorry to say your son David crapped out at 19,000 feet," or whatever, when you're 21 years old and stupid. So there were moments like that, moments of humor, moments of, but especially moments of trust. That was key. A long answer to your question. Humor had a lot to do with it. Shared goals, but mostly we really came to trust each other. I mean, I put my life in the hands of those 6 guys.
Very cool. And and I know you've had lots of other adventures and stuff along that line, and so which I'd love to hear the others, and I guess we'll have to hear your podcast in order to hear some of those other adventures and stuff. But one of the other things I thought was amazing, and I'm sure there was some great conversations when you were working as the foreign policy advisor to Senator John Glenn. I bet there was some cool stories there between the two of you. Um, can you kind of talk about that? And you're also a member of the NATO Nuclear Planning Group. So to be in a leadership position at that level, and with conflicts happening and discussions and negotiations and stuff, there had to be some very educating components around leadership. And so, is there a story there that you could tell us or help guide us on that experience there? To
Well,
be in that leadership role at that high.
sure. And these are two entirely different episodes, so I'm going to take them separately. The first was John Glenn. He taught me a hell of a lot. Glenn, of course, the astronaut. I, st- I would have done anything for that man because he was such a nice guy. Um, he was an important senator. Of course, he was smart and tough and experienced. He got a lot done. I did some good work for him on banning selling weapons to the third world, where they just made tribal conflicts worse. And he trusted me. He gave me an enormous amount of slack, and that's something that I really learned and profited from. Here I was not young anymore. I was now mid-30s, but still, actually, yeah, mid-30s, I guess. And he trusted me with really important stuff. I mean, writing bills that would go before the Senate, for example. He trusted me to do that. I didn't know what I was doing. I was a Foreign Service officer, seconded for a year up to his office. But he gave me a few pointers, lent me a few mentors, and then turned me loose. I mean, I did the research and all that and guided the legislation. And it was amazing to me that this extremely distinguished man would look at this complete beginner, really, in terms of in terms of legislative policy, that he would give me that much trust. And so I think that's an important point with Glenn. The other thing, as I said, that he was such a nice guy. I remember once my daughter then was a little Girl Scout. They called them brownies in those days, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So she was like a little knobby-kneed 10-year-old. And she had a little brownie troop, and I got John Glenn to agree to receive her brownie troop in his office. And he was quick to do so. I mean, you can imagine a really busy guy, an important senator. He says, "Okay, we'll give her let's do it in 15 minutes or so." So the little brownie troop troops into his office, and he's there with them for an hour. And he gets down on the floor with them and then uses his hands to describe what it was like being in the space capsule and going this way and that way. And these little girls were like, "Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness." And he was like a grandpa for those little girls. And I also never forgot that no matter how big in your britches you get, how important you are, how much money you're earning, that being a really nice, kind, compassionate person is a key element of good leadership and a key element of building trust. I never forgot that either. I fail, obviously, sometimes. I've gotten really mad at people or done some stupid things. But John Glenn taught me that lesson, that no matter how big in your britches you get, you got to be a nice guy, or people are going to look and bite you in the back, or they're not going to follow your lead, or they'll do something to undermine what you're trying to do. Okay, second thing, the NPG, totally different. And that was all about power. The NPG was perhaps the most prestigious assignment in the whole U.S. Foreign Service. It stood for Nuclear Planning Group, and we were tasked with planning nuclear war in Europe. So I would fly to Brussels or Germany once or or even twice, once or a week or so, or at least a couple times a month. And I would meet in super secret meetings with Germans and French and other people in NATO, and we would do all of the super secret planning about where the missiles would go, how would what the megatonnage would be, et cetera, and we would be shuttled around in big black limousines, and we couldn't talk about anything we were doing, not even to our families, but everybody knew that we were the important guys. And so we got totally wrapped up in that. And I'm ashamed to say that I got totally wrapped up. My ego got totally wrapped up in all that attention. And that's a false kind of leadership, I think, because what was sustaining me with an NPG was my own ego. I was on top of a heap, and I really enjoyed the fame. And it was crazy because what we were doing was crazy. We were planning, Mark, for World War III. Now, I don't think a 10-year-old could figure out that there isn't going to be a World War IV, that World War III would be the end of it, as the then Soviet Union and the United States were lobbing nuclear weapons at each other. The planet would be a smoking ruin in a couple of days. But that didn't keep us from going to all these super secret meetings and doing all this planning. Oh no, because we didn't want this to end. Planning nuclear war was really cool, even though it was crazy. By the way, we were all men. By the way, all males. I think had there been a single woman on the NPG, she would have looked at this gang of guys in black suits and red ties and said, "Are you guys friggin' crazy? Are you crazy? Is what we're doing crazy?" But there wasn't, and there was no one doing that. So we got caught up in our 15 minutes of fame, and so that's a negative aspect of what the leadership is about. You just can't get caught up in your own press releases, and the NPG was that. So these two things, Glenn, a hugely positive experience in leadership. The NPG, I'm not proud of it.
And I couldn't quite tell which one came first. Was it the NPG or working with Senator Glenn, or was it kind of at the same time?
It was about the same time. Yeah, mid 70s. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So definitely during the big hype of the Cold War and everything around that period of time. So
Yeah, and I was trying also, and this had, let me just slip in a little bit of background for our listeners here. I was trying very hard then to dig out of a very deep hole. I had a whole life of adventures, and my last adventure was being in a really dangerous spot in the war in Vietnam. And it was in Vietnam, during a battle in Vietnam, that I really realized that a life centered just on adrenaline rushes was a pretty shallow life. And so I determined that if I got out of that battle alive, I was going to change my life. And I tried. I did. I started looking at a more compassionate side to me, which enormously influenced my leadership. And this was a few years before John Glenn, so I didn't have those mentors like him. But I could see myself that I was leading a disastrous life and making life miserable and dangerous for a lot of other people, and I needed to change it. So I did. I crawled out of that self-centered hole, ended up at the United Nations, and there my life really did change for the better. But it took a long time. It took a long time, Mark. So I haven't been on the side of the angels for for my entire life. The first half of my life, it was a hell of an adventure. I mean, I did stuff that will curl your hair. Your listeners can read a memoir all about it. But I'm not proud of some of it. And the last 45 years, I think I have been making the world a better place, but not for the first part of my life.
yeah. Yeah, we all had to grow up at some point, right? So,
well, I don't know. Growing up, I think it was more than that. I think it was like you say, you can't get me to start running through all those adventures, or we'd be here for 3 hours. But it was it was a lot of stuff going on that I really, and every time I had an adventure, I was either doing big, dangerous mountains, or I was getting shot at, or in wars and revolutions. I was in the middle, for example, of the revolution in Libya, and then the war in Vietnam, et cetera, et cetera. And I kept walking away from all this stuff. So the more invulnerable I became, the more I thought I would continue to be invulnerable. So that's why my early life was one really wild-ass adventure, dangerous assignment after the other. So it was a little bit more extreme than when most people, and young men in particular, decide that they're going to have a lot of adventures and do so. For me, it was like a religion or a drug. It was more like a drug, and the drug was adrenaline.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in these leadership roles and stuff, and especially dealing with other countries and, the politics behind it, communications has to be very important. So, can you talk about the importance of communicating at that level and, especially around reducing risk and misunderstanding or miscommunications? Because obviously, if you're talking about nuclear weapons here, you don't want to misunderstand or miscommunicate something there. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And the most important thing is to establish trust. I mean, even with dealing with the Russian KGB or with opponents, um, at the United Nations, for example, some of my best friends were Castro Cubans. I wasn't even supposed to talk to them because they were, of course, on the other side in the Cold War, Castro's Cubans. But they were funny and they were baseball nuts like I was, and so we spent a lot of time hanging out. And seriously, we did some serious stuff together. I worked with the Cubans, for example, and basically double-crossed my own government to work with the Cubans trying to get the American hostages out of Iran. Some of your viewers may remember that way back when that 52 Americans were held captive by a mob in Tehran for over a year. And I almost got them freed using the Cubans with their pressure on Castro as an intermediary. And so, how did that happen? How was I dealing with America's opponents? Well, because we trusted each other at a certain level. I didn't spill nuclear secrets to the Cubans. They didn't spill Fidel Castro's agenda to me. We knew better than that. The other thing was that what another one of my good friends at the United Nations was a KGB agent. KGB being their intelligence services, if anyone doesn't know. And this guy and I shared a lot, mostly because at that stage of my life, I was deeply interested in mysticism, that kind of stuff. And so was Dmitri in his own way. But he was trapped. I wasn't. He was trapped in the Soviet system, and he couldn't get out. So he had to get up in the United Nations and give speeches condemning the United States and explaining the Russian invasion of Afghanistan and saying lots of things he knew weren't true. And it really began to wear him down. And we talked about that, but we never divulged state secrets to each other. But I could see he was in serious trouble. And he was a real friend. And then one night, he goes into his bathroom with a couple bottles of vodka and drinks a lethal dose of vodka. I don't know, 3 or 4 bottles of vodka, and kills himself.
wow.
And the FBI were really after me, wanting to know what the hell I knew about it. I just said, hey, this guy was super sad because he was being forced to follow a policy that he didn't believe in, and people were dying, and he was a very sensitive guy, so he kills himself. But that didn't mean that I wasn't real friends with him, and that didn't mean that communications weren't important. It just that I wasn't enough of a friend to save his life, I guess. But we were enough of a friends that we could talk about these things. So, yeah, the thing is two things. First of all, you got to be responsible. Certainly, if you're in a really sensitive job, as I was with nuclear secrets and other kinds of secrets, or if you're a corporate guy, you don't want to divulge third quarter earnings before they're out, and you don't want to give the designs for a new widget you're making. Of course not. But that doesn't mean that you can't develop trust with a guy working in a competitor, and that trust will help each of you, make miscalculations. Because a lot of times in conflict, it's about miscalculating. I just don't know what you're about to do because we don't talk about it, and we're not honest to talk about it because we don't trust each other. So one or the other of us does something stupid because out of sheer ignorance of where the other person is, and then things snowball and out of control. So it's important to establish enough trust so that when you have to, you can sit down with the other person and say, "Hey, look, this is sliding out. This is sliding really sideways. Is there something we can do here? And do you see that it's sliding sideways? Yeah, you do. Okay, then maybe we can go back to our bosses and come up with something." Uh, so you need to be tough and not stupid, of course, in protecting state secrets or corporate secrets or even secrets within your family or your community. But at the same time, you have to honor the fact that trust ultimately is what prevents conflicts, whether it's a war in Europe or a proxy battle in a company in Ohio.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned the hostage, Iranian hostage, and one of those hostages were actually just right up the street from me, Rocky Sickman here in Missouri.
Oh,
And I actually later on, as I got older, I actually worked in healthcare with his sister and everything. So I've never met him personally or talked to him, but he was definitely, back during that time in the St. Louis area, which he was from Krakow, Missouri, which is outside of St. Louis. But, he was definitely in the news a lot back whenever I was, I don't know, 8, 10 years old, somewhere around there. So, yeah. Um, so, in these high pressure situations and stuff, what advice do you have for leaders in those high pressure moments? And you definitely hit on part of it about building trust, and we talked about communications. Any other advice?
yeah, I do have some other advice because you can get in situations where it's pretty easy to to panic. It's natural to get scared. There's nothing wrong with getting scared. In fact, sometimes if you're not scared, you're not doing your job. But panicking is something quite different. Um, and what I tell people is, if you're looking like you're taking some risk and you're not sure where things are going to go, and you're not sure of the next move, and you're really getting a little concerned, you go back to why you're there, basically, and what you're doing there and what it means to you. And this question of meaning is really important. By meaning, I mean looking deep into your heart and figuring out what's going on that's in sync with your own highest priorities. And for meaning, for me, for my experience, you can find meaning in lots of places. Like, for example, as a young man, I found meaning in my life through my adventuring. I got friends now that think they found meaning through money and power. Maybe they have for a while. But I found that ultimately the kind of meaning that really counts is some kind of service, some kind of giving back. And so you look at a tough situation and you say, okay, what's the meaningful thing to do? Is there anything here that I can do that actually will make things end up better? That's some kind of service. That calms you down, at least it calms me down. Because then I know I'm looking for some kind of higher purpose. And I'm not being naive. Don't get me wrong. If you're in trouble, you want me in your foxhole. I'm a really tough guy, but I also know that looking at where the service can be, where we can move the ball ahead, even with a tough opponent, is important. For example, out here where I live in Island County, Washington, there's all kinds of environmental disputes. There's the environmentalists on one side, and there's farmers and
Mhm.
foresters and land developers on the other. And left to our own devices, we are constantly fighting. Well, I led a group here for over 10 years, an environmental group, and I insisted that we spend a whole lot of time really understanding the other side instead of demonizing them. Really understand how a farmer's finances really were behind his insistence on putting his fences further close to the wetlands so that he had more acres for his crops to graze in, or more collateral to get buy the seed from the bank or send his kid to college or whatever. And the same thing, understanding the economics of forestry, and the same way understanding that that developers aren't all bad, that building low-income housing is important, should be supported, et cetera, et cetera. But you don't get there if you demonize people. So you learn to sit down and trust. I mean, in this environmental thing, I led a group of about 30 people or so, and I insisted that we all go out and sit on hay bales or tractor fenders or whatever, and just listen to a farmer unload about everything from farm economics to his animosity toward do-gooder environmentalists who are screwing his bank account. And then to have a chance maybe to explain to the farmer where they're coming from, that they're not just fancy pantsy do-gooders, that clean air and clean water are important, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
So it's looking at that side of oneself, of looking at life as a service, and being tough as nails when you have to. In some cases, what I just said is not possible. You're dealing with some real SOBs that are impenetrable, in which case you just got to roll up your sleeves and fight. But I would say, I don't know, 4 times out of 5, you don't have to. You can work around. You can work through that. But a lot of it is understanding what is there in the situation that will actually move the ball ahead, not just in a way that suits my end. I mean, if I'm a Democrat, not just for Democratic purposes, or if I'm a Republican, not just for Republican purposes, but actually moves the ball ahead in terms of benefiting people in general. I know that sounds idealistic to a lot of my hard-bitten friends, but damn it, like I say, I'm a tough guy, and I know when to be tough, but I also know to constantly look for opportunities to build trust with an opponent.
Yeah, that's great. And it's important to listen. If you can't just be speaking all the time. It's why there's two ears and only one mouth, right? As the old saying goes.
Is that right?
So,
Oh
yeah.
gosh,
So,
yeah. There's one other snippet I should have added. At one point, with a really difficult battle with the county commissioners, all of whom were right wingers, and me being a little bit to the left, it looked like we were heading into a massive court fight that would damage everything. But we all knew what we were fighting about, and so I got up in a public session in the county courthouse, and I said, "Okay, commissioners, basically, we've been at this for so long, years now. I know your playbook and you know my playbook. So we're going to court next Thursday, and I'm going to tell you what our courtroom strategy is." And I did, honestly. I says, "Look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to tell the judge this, or we're going to tell the judge that. Um, and by the way, I also know what your strategy is. And you're going to get up there and you're going to tell the judge this, and you're going to tell the judge that." So these commissioners sitting there with their mouths open. What is this guy doing? I mean, this is our enemy, and he's telling us what our courtroom strategies are. By the way, he's right, but he's also telling us what his strategies are. So we got to assume he's telling the truth. And so the meeting ended in disarray. But 2 days later, just before the court fight, they sent their lawyer over to talk to me, and that lawyer and I sat down in the back room of a local bar, and we worked out a solution so that we could call the court and say, "Hey, we don't need the court anymore. We've solved it ourselves. What's the point of going to the
nice.
court if I know what you're going to say, you know what I'm going to say? Why let a judge decide it? Let's decide it ourselves." But that
Right.
was a case where you're dealing with an opponent and you establish trust. In this case, I established trust through a kind of shock treatment by being brutally honest in a way that completely disarmed them.
Hmm. So during your adventures and even other times, there was probably times of setback or maybe low morale or motivation. So, what did you do to overcome those setbacks and to stay motivated when things got tough? And I'm sure sitting in that tent for 37 days, there was some tough times up there when you were stuck in that tent. So,
Well, that was more like I've already explained. That was just because of the sheer adventure of it all, man. That was cool.
Yeah.
I think your question's more relevant to people that are older. When you have the dark nights of the soul, maybe there's a business reverse, maybe a divorce, whatever. I go back to what I talked about 10 minutes ago. What sustains me is the meaning of my life. I really do think that I think the meaning of life is a life strategy. And then the things you do to find that meaning are life tactics, strategy, tactics. And the meaning of my life, I discovered, is hugely important. And I think that's true for everybody. It's true for you, Mark. It's true for everybody, even the people that I don't like. The doing something meaningful is important. You look at a mirror in the morning, and what looks back at you, you want to know is on the planet for a reason. You're not just marking time. That'd be like having a fancy Swiss watch with no hands on it, wouldn't it? So meaning is important. And so I go back to what's meaningful for me, and I keep coming back to, well, I tried lots of stuff, but what's important to me is some kind of service, some kind of solving tough public problems, some kind of whatever. And here I am, okay, dark night of the soul. I've just had some real reversals. Well, I go back to first causes. I go back to first causes. What's meaningful to me? What's meaningful to me is helping. What's meaningful to me is some kind of service. So if I'm not making it this way, maybe there's some other way I can make that. And I do that, and I don't know what the metaphor is, but if I look deeply enough to find the meaningful aspect of the situation I'm in, which seems to be pretty dark, and I get there, I began to focus on that. It's the mountains that I see ahead of me, not the real mountains, but the figurative mountains I see ahead of me. They kind of become like speed bumps. That's it. The big hills become speed bumps. Why? Because I know I'm doing something meaningful to me. And like I say, it's like looking at that face looking back at you in the mirror in the morning.
Mhm.
If you know what you're doing, what you're about to set out and do that day is meaningful, your step is lighter, your mind is clear, your countenance is more agreeable to other people. It makes a huge difference. So that's how I start. Not that I don't have dark nights of the soul, not that I don't get really discouraged, have some reversals. I'm just telling you, you ask me what I do, and I just say I pull back. Sometimes it takes a walk in the woods or looking up at a starry sky, and sometimes it doesn't happen for a couple of days or whatever. But I pull back and to first causes. What's meaningful to me? Come on, John. This fact that you're about to lose umpty ump zillion dollars or whatever, that's bad. Yeah, okay. But what's really meaningful is not that money, not that power. It's something else. It's who you are. It's the way other people look at you. It's the impact you're having on the planet. That's what's meaningful. And so I focus on that, and that helps pull me back.
Great. So one of the things, I know you've been heavily involved with the Draft Heroes project since the early 80s, I think 83. Um, kind of talk a little bit about that, and maybe, because from what I read, there was, that's coordinating a lot of stuff around the world, and I would think that could be challenging at times. So can you briefly talk about what the Draft Heroes project is, and maybe around coordination and support?
Sure. First of all, I hesitate to say that I want everyone listening and viewing to know that I didn't start the Giraffe Heroes Project. My wife, Ann Medlock, started it as a single mother in New York City, as you say, in the early 1980s. She called it the Giraffe Project because her goal was to find people who were sticking their necks out, hence the metaphor, tall neck.
Mhm.
uh, and to tell their stories, get their stories told any way she could. Now, in the 1980s, without the internet, it was like vinyl records or fax machines or whatever. But that's what Anne was doing. She started doing it. I thought it was kind of lightweight, quite frankly. I mean, telling stories, really. I mean, giving important speeches, I thought, was the way to change the world, but that wasn't seem to be working too well. But Anne started telling stories, and people really got on to what she was doing. And within a few years, there was a nice feature on her in the New York Times, and she was off and running. About that time, I met her, and I fell madly in love with her. So everything she was doing became much more important. and we got married. And so since for 43 years now, we've been running the Giraffe Project together, doing what she started to do in the early 1980s, finding heroes, telling their stories as a way of inspiring other people to get off their butts and take action too, solving the problems that are important to them. It's now branched off into a huge program for schools. I've written 5 books, more or less, on the subjects of risk-taking and leadership and service. So we're into lots of stuff. You mentioned briefly, I think, the badass granddad. Well, I urge your viewers to go to Instagram or TikTok and dial in badass granddad, badass all one word, and granddad 2 D's in the middle, and you'll see some of the 3-minute videos I'm doing, all aimed at people a third my age, telling adventure stories, but also some life learning lessons that at age 83, I think I earned the right to tell. So that's great fun too. So we're doing all of that, and yeah, the coordination is important, but this is not hard. I mean, and this is not a part of that I'm particularly good at. I can do it, but it's not really important to talk about it because Ann and I run the project, and we have a lot of people helping us do that. And we're pretty good business people, although this is a nonprofit, and we make it work. I particularly am in charge of all of our overseas operations. We have affiliates in 7 different countries doing much the same thing we do here in the United States, and we keep churning out these stories and writing books. And I'm not going into hotel ballrooms anymore or giving speeches because COVID shut that down. But I am doing a whole lot of podcasting, a whole lot of blogging. I got Badass Granddad. I write books. And also at 83, I don't want to cram myself in airplane seats anymore. So social media is where I'm doing it. But I'm not going to quit. I mean, why? Why? The idea of retiring is ridiculous. What would I retire from? I'm having too much fun. So yeah, it's complicated, but it's no more complicated than any other small business. What's important, I think, is not the complications of it, but because it's an idealistic enterprise, what we are, as one of our board members said once, we teach courage. So we're dealing with people's emotions and behavior, and that part is tricky. And Ann and I are constantly assessing what we're doing and talking to people. And trying to reach new audiences, in particular young people now, with messages of courage and service without sounding smarmy or out of it. So that some of that is difficult. You really have to think about it and try different things. But it's all about the emotional part, if you will, almost the spiritual part. I mean, what is it trying to get people to focus on what's important at a very deep level in their own lives? For some, it is religion. For a lot of others, it's not.
Great. It sounds definitely like a worthwhile cause, and pointing out the positive of what things are doing, which is just amazing. So that's great.
And also, I hasten to add, we don't just tell good stories. Some of the giraffes that we honor, and we've honored now 2,000 of them in 42 years, some of them crash and burn. I mean, if you stick your neck out, you don't always succeed. Some of them don't succeed, but many of them do. And we tell their stories, whether they succeed or whether they fail, because those stories are inspiring. And by the way, getting hold of those stories is really easy. They're all on the Giraffe website, which is simply giraffe.org. Very simple, giraffe.org.
Great.
So I urge people to do that and log into what we're doing and read some of these stories.
All right, great. So a couple questions I ask all my guests, or try to at least, is what is something that you're tired of hearing about?
Oh, it's something I'm tired of hearing about. I don't have the time to do that. You've always got time. It's a question of life priorities. And if you're totally consumed with uh, making money or totally consuming, getting up the next rung on your corporate ladder without thinking about what the impact will be on your family or your community. Well, I don't have a lot of patience with that.
Yeah. And what is something that we can all do better?
I think focus on meaning. I think our lives are so busy. Young people in particular, Jesus, you look at some of them, what they're looking at on their phones, uh, and you wonder, well, is there anything left of their brains listening to that stuff all day long? But you focusing on what's meaningful. Not, I don't mean walking around every day saying, "Oh, what's meaningful around the next corner." I'm talking about just generally going through life, understanding that what you really like to do is to make one meaningful move after the other. And then taking time out, that quiet walk in the woods, looking up at a starry sky, the talking with a trusted friend, just to pull you back to that sense of John, what's meaningful? Well, it's the same thing that's been meaningful to me for 45 years. Okay. And it's not going to change now at age 83. And I think that's true for a lot of people. You find that life strategy, that life meaning, and then the rest of it is simply finding the tactics to make that work. For me, the tactics involve public speaking and the Giraffe Project and all the media stuff that I'm doing. Other people may find that that kind of service in I don't know, being a barber or a neurosurgeon or sweeping floors for that matter. You find it somewhere, but you move the ball ahead, and it makes a whole difference in how you look at yourself.
Well, John, thank you very much for all your wonderful stories and taking the time to tell them here on the Cyber Executive Podcast. It was amazing to hear everything and your words of wisdom. So thank you very much for being here today.
I'm very happy to be here. I think it was great fun. I hope people gain something from it.
Oh, I'm sure they will. And for all of our audience, again, just a quick reminder for everyone to share and like us on your favorite podcast app of choice, uh, and also to share the Cyber Executive Podcast with all your friends. And until next episode, thank you for listening. And John, thanks again for being here.
Thank you.